Look, so many video on Spider-Man Miles Morales with the RTX SSDI. We're going to be starting off with 1080p on the high preset. Alright, let's jump into the settings real quick. 1080p, no DLSS obviously, and using DLAA for anti-aliasing, and using the high preset. No RT and no RT shadows yet, but I'll enable that once we get past through the initial tests. Alright, looks good. Let's get going. So hopefully we don't get CPU bottleneck in this title. We're playing at high settings, and oh man, yeah, as soon as I say that, GPU does drop down into the 75% usage, but on average we're sitting in the low 90s, so we still have some headroom left on the GPU side of things. We should be able to get around 120 FPS, I would imagine, once the bottleneck is gone. Obviously in those heavier scenes we are fully maxed out on the GPU side of things, and we're sitting in the high 90s, low 100s. Game's running quite well. It's not stuttering or lagging at all. But I know with the 3080, once you get up to very high settings, the stuttering will get more common, and using ray tracing definitely doesn't help that at all. On foot, we're getting 104, 120 FPS depending where we're looking. So it really depends on what area of the map you're in and what you're looking at. That will definitely that will affect your FPS quite heavily. So VRAM is sitting at 6.6 gigs already at high settings. This card only has 8 gigs of VRAM, so 4K and 1440p. I think 1440p is going to be fine, but 4K might be a bit hard for us to run since we have a limited VRAM. I do know with the 3080 at very high settings we used around like 8.5 gigs up to 9.5 gigs, so might be running into an issue even at 1080p with this, but hopefully we're fine. Hopefully we end up being fine. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and enable ray tracing now. Shadows turned to high, reflections turned to high, and let's see what we get. Okay, just below 60 FPS, not bad. This is definitely still playable. Don't really have to get a lock 60 for this game. I think 40 FPS even is fine, as long as it's a stable 40 and you're not stuttering all over the place. Alright, as we're swinging, we're sitting around the mid 60s, dropping down into the mid 50s, so it's like a 10 FPS range. So honestly, it feels very great, it feels very playable, very smooth. I don't really have an issue with this at all, even though FPS is in the low 50s. We can use DLSS as well, of course. 1080p, it doesn't look the best, you're definitely losing a bit of quality for sure. I think I'd rather just not use ray tracing and get a good FPS range than use RT and be forced to use DLSS. Because the reflections already look pretty good in this game, you don't really need to have ray tracing. It definitely helps the look, obviously, but if it's going to sacrifice all your FPS, then it's not worth using at all. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and enable DLSS real quick. Display, upscaling, DLSS. Going to use the quality preset, which is the highest for DLSS in this title. And there you go. Looks pretty similar to native 1080p, but FPS is still in the low 50s. GPU usage is at 50%. Game is very intensive. We have a 40% GPU headroom. That's just sitting there. But the quality of the DLSS is pretty decent, I gotta say. It's not too bad. You do get slight blurring, but it's not that big of a deal, honestly. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and push it up to 1440p now. Still gonna be using the high preset. There we go. Playing at 1440p, same settings as before. High preset, no RT and no RT shadows. At 1080p we were sitting around 90 to 120 FPS I believe, so we did run into some CPU bottlenecks where GPU was sitting around 70% usage, but that was for a split second, it wasn't very common. On average we're sitting in the low 90s. Now at 1440p we're sitting at 98% GPU usage, VRAM is still sitting at 6 gigs, and FPS is in the mid to high 90s, dropping down into the low 80s. 1440p definitely looks fantastic in this game, looks super clear now versus playing at 1080p. And FPS is slightly low, not too bad, still very playable obviously. As long as you're above 40 FPS, you can play with keyboard and mouse in this game and still have a good time. Once you drop down into the 30s though, you want to use a controller. VRAM is slowly climbing up, sitting at 6.3 gigs now, and it's still going up. But overall, it's doing pretty good. No stuttering, no lagging at all. FPS has been pretty good. Now let's go ahead and enable ray tracing and obviously tank our FPS. Alright, gonna be using the high preset, just like before. here it is. GPU sitting at 99%, fully maxed out. FPS is sitting at 43 FPS. And, oh, this is feeling a bit choppy now. I gotta say, this is feeling slightly more choppy than before. 1080p was still possible as a good experience, but 1440p be getting some micro stutters here and there that are kind of ruining the experience a little bit. Let's see if it keeps happening, if it's common or if it's just a one-off. I think at the end of the day, it's all personal preference. I think for me, this is a bit too choppy, but you might like it with the controller, so it really depends. And I'm gonna go ahead and use DLSS. So we gained a little bit of FPS. We're sitting at 50 FPS instead of 44 FPS, I believe. So doing a little bit better. GPU sitting at 83% now instead of 99%. So it is getting bottlenecked. CPU sitting at 40%. VRAM is at 6.5 gigs now, so it's climbing up again. FPS is in the 50s, no stuttering. Feeling a little bit better actually compared to just Nathan 1440p with RT enabled. Yeah, we are getting some stuttering though, you gotta keep that in mind. We are still getting some stuttering when I'm swinging around. It's not a perfect smooth experience. Those heavier scenes, I am experiencing some dips. And VRAM is still climbing up, 6.5 gigs now instead of 6.4 gigs. Pushing this up to 4K. This is gonna be the most intensive setting yet. Wow, this game looks so good. This game looks incredible with 4K. Oh my god, this looks good. Getting 40 FPS. VRAM is at 6.6 gigs again. This looks so clear though. It's crystal clear. It's insane that good this looks. Wow. I'm gonna use DLSS in a second. I know how it looks already at 4K. It looks fantastic. I think quality and balance are the way to go. From memory, you can get away with using performance as well if you need to. We're sitting in the 40s, in the low 40s, and jumping up into the low 50s. Pretty wide gap. Game is stuttering occasionally. It's not as bad as like 1440p with RT enabled. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and enable DLSS just to see what we can get with quality DLSS. I said it twice, nice. Apply. Yep. With quality DLSS, getting 60 FPS right now. We're gonna obviously have some dips into the 50s. It's not gonna be a consistent 60, but it's a good start. Wow, 70 FPS, alright. It actually climbed up instead of going down. Pretty great. I'm kind of waiting for very high settings though. That preset is it's dangerous with how tough it is. Yeah, I think in this case I would still use balanced DLSS just to have some extra headroom in case of a heavier scene. But if you don't mind dropping down into the 50s occasionally, then this is obviously still usable. Looks just like native, and you're getting 60 FPS on average for the most part. So I'm gonna go ahead and increase the DLSS quality to balance. Oh, it's flipped, I forgot. Now using balanced DLSS, how does this look? It's just as good as DLSS quality. Looks very good, but FPS is still sitting in the low 60s. That's kind of close to our 60 FPS limit. I want to go back into the city again, see if we can get maybe 80 FPS this time. But no, we're still sitting in the low to mid 60s, surprisingly. But even with DLSS at the balance, we are falling down below 60, unfortunately. But overall, this is a pretty great experience regardless. Alright, now let's go to enable RT, high settings at native 4K. We're sitting in the low to mid 40s, I believe, at native 4K with no RT. And now we're sitting in the low 20s. Whoa, this is so laggy. GPU is actually 100% now. I rarely see this thing hit 100%, but it actually did hit it finally at 4K with RT enabled. VRAM isn't climbing past 6.5 gigs, it seems like. The most I've seen it hit is 6.6 gigs. But yeah, we're doing fine there. And enable DLSS. Maybe we can get a 30 FPS experience with this. Gonna use the balance preset just to keep it balanced. Here we go. With balanced DLSS, getting 40 FPS, so almost double. But we are going to be falling down into the 30s, obviously, in those heavier scenes. I'm going to look for any stuttering or any inconsistencies that I can see. But it seems to be doing pretty great. Alright, now let's go ahead and push it up to the very high settings. I'm going to go ahead and restart the game and come back. So very high settings, I'll show it up before I go. There we go. I'm going to disable RT. Oops. And yeah, alright. Be back in a second. I'm back, and now we're playing the game at very high settings. 1080p. Alright. I've already shown the settings off before, so if you missed it, you gotta go back. But yeah, sitting at 104 FPS, so slightly lower than what we had at the high preset.
As long as the octopus-related flaws have been fixed.
Let's hope.
Now what I'm looking for is the stuttering that we got with the 3080 at 1440p and 4K. I think 1080p was still fine, but we had some major stuttering issues at 1440p and 4K at very high settings. I think when I enable RTs, I'm going to see the stuttering happen. VRAM climbed up by a full gig pretty much. We're sitting at 7.5 gigs now instead of 6.5 gigs at pretty much 4K high settings. And it's still climbing up too, that's kind of worrying. We're going to be running out of VRAM in a second. But yeah, overall, it's running very smooth, no stuttering, no lagging. This is a great experience at 1080p. Wow, we had a massive dip into the mid-70s for a second. But yeah, if you have a 1080p screen, then you're not going to have any issues playing this game with this card, even at max settings, as long as you have RT disabled. Alright, gonna be using the very high preset. This is gonna absolutely kill our FPS, but let's see how we do. Oh my god, 25 FPS. I think this will come back up. With the 3080 definitely did bounce back, but maybe one with the 3060 Ti. Is it not gonna bounce back? Do we get 30 FPS? Oh my god, this is super taxing. I guess we're playing at 30 to 40 FPS now. Just gonna be looking for any stuttering or any lagging. So far this card is doing quite alright. This is definitely still playable. It's a bit risky because you're so close to that 30 FPS limit. I think at 1080p I would disable RT unless you're cool with dropping down into the 20s occasionally. Or if you like the DLSS look at 1080p. Personally I don't really, but it's all personal preference. With quality DLSS, we gained around 9 FPS because we're sitting in the low 30s here, and now we're sitting in the high 30s. Let's keep going. I personally just don't like the 1080p look at this point, I think. I think 1440p is just such a massive jump, and this card can definitely handle 1440p gaming quite fine, so I think it's definitely worth it to play at 1440p for these kind of games and to be stuck at 1080p and get high frames. Yeah, again, not getting any stuttering or lagging at all. This is fine. It's running very smoothly. No issues with this at all. FPS obviously is still pretty bad, sitting in the low 40s up to the low 50s. But if you're cool with this frame rate, then it's definitely usable. Alright, now playing the game at 1440p. Oh man. Oh man. Okay, I thought we were sitting at 40 FPS. It's fine. We're sitting in the high 50s, I guess, or the mid 50s, I should say. Now, personally, I would avoid playing at the very high settings. I think, ideally, I would go with medium or high, or a mix of both. But it's good to see that you can get away with playing the game at very high settings and still have a good experience. So FPS is ranging between the mid-50s up to the low 70s. Quite good. Can use DLSS at 1440p as well if you like, and get a little bit of an extra FPS boost out of it, which I'll be doing in a second. Okay, we are getting some slight stuttering. It's very occasional. It's not happening very often at all. It's happened like once or twice, I think, at this point at 1440p. So it's not very common. Now with DLSS set to quality, no RT enabled, obviously. What are we getting? Look at that, 90 to 100 FPS. Very nice. And that's why I like playing at 1440p instead of 1080p. You can use DLSS to get all your FPS back and have a way better, way sharper looking game. Alright. VRAM has dropped back down into 6.5 gigs, which is nice, I guess. Didn't really see much of a climb. And The game is definitely stuttering a little bit more than what it was at the high preset, but still not enough to ruin the experience, in my opinion. I was gonna say 60 FPS is no way. We had like 40 FPS at 1080p, or 30 FPS I should say. And we're getting 30 FPS. Oh no, we're not. We're getting 20 FPS. Oh my god, this is so choppy. Very inconsistent. We're sitting in the low 20s up to the low 30s. This is very laggy though at this point. I would avoid playing like this if I had the chance. With balanced DLSS, what do we get? 40 FPS, okay. I guess it's slightly better, but not by much. 50 FPS, there we go, that's much better. So 40 to 50 FPS with balanced DLSS. Oh, we're getting some massive stuttering there for a second. That was pretty bad. Oh, this is getting really bad again, yep. Oh my god, getting some dips into the 20s still. But yeah, I would avoid playing at 440p with the RT enabled, or at very high settings anyway. You can probably use the low settings in RT and have a decent time, but at max settings, it's just too much for this card. And finally, playing the game at 4K. Let's see what we can get. No, 20 FPS? No way, right? Alright, 4K very high settings. Let's see. This game looks amazing at 4K, man. It's so sharp. Just getting 30 FPS with major stuttering. Oh my god, that's really bad. That is horrendous. Sitting at 17 FPS. Whoa, it's becoming a slideshow. Okay. This is getting out of hand. The stuttering isn't as bad as the RTX 3080. I think maybe the game was just running into an issue at some point. But at the very high settings, it started stuttering way more often than what we're having right here. We are still getting some stuttering here. It's not perfect, obviously, but it's nowhere near as bad as the RTX 3080, where it was happening every like 20 seconds or every 10 seconds. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and use the performance DLSS, and we're gonna see hopefully we can get 60 FPS out of it. Probably not, but with performance DLSS, can we get 60? Yes, we can. Very nice. Whoa, where am I going? Alright, it's definitely playable at this point. It is still stuttering though, keep that in mind. The game is stuttering. So I think ideally you want to go with the high preset. That was way more clean, way more smooth than what we're seeing here. But if you have to play at max settings, then you can use performance DLSS and have a good looking game while getting 60 FPS. Let's go to enable RT and hopefully we don't crash while we're doing it. Alright, RT set to very high. Apply. And let's see what we get. Probably 10 FPS if I was going to guess. Okay, 15 FPS. That's better than expected. I can't even move anymore. I'm pressing jump and it's not doing it. It's not jumping. Oh my god, look at this. Yeah, 10 FPS, we just hit that. This is such a slideshow. That's enough. I'm gonna get a headache. I gotta stop. I don't think anyone's gonna be playing like this, but we'll just show it regardless, I guess. I can't even get into the settings anymore. Gonna go with ultra performance just to give us any chance that we can have at having a decent experience. Apply. Okay. Nice, 10 FPS on the dot. Very good. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is just bugged. Let's just apply to FSR. Then let's go back to DLSS. Come on game, you can do it. Give us 20 FPS or something. There we go. 20 FPS with double that frame rate. From a literal slideshow to a cinematic experience. Alright, That's it for the video, guys. If you made this far, appreciate you. And as always, if you like what you see, then a like. Subscribe to the channel helps you as well. See you next time.